I spent 11 years working the overnight crossing on the Harrow Sound ferry. People don't think much about ferry workers. Your invisible infrastructure. The boat runs, the cars load, the passengers cross, the boat runs back. Most of what I did between midnight and 6 in the morning was walk corridors, check the passenger lounges, make sure nobody was sick or doing something they shouldn't. The sound crossing took 40 minutes each way. I did it 6 times a shift. In 11 years, I saw a lot of strange things. None of them prepared me for what started in the autumn of my 9th year. The first time I noticed the woman, it was a Wednesday night in October. The late crossings rarely brought more than a handful of foot passengers. The cars were one thing, but people who crossed on foot after 11 usually had a reason that wasn't their business. A man in paint-speckled coveralls was asleep across 2 seats in the forward lounge. A teenage girl with a backpack twice her size was staring at her phone near the vending machines. And in the rear observation lounge, which I typically found empty at that hour, a woman was sitting by the starboard window. She was maybe 60, silver hair pulled back, a heavy wool coat that looked like it had been practical once, maybe decades ago. Her hands were folded in her lap. She wasn't watching the water. She wasn't reading. She was simply sitting with her eyes open, facing the window, seeing nothing. I didn't think much of it. Some people cross just to have somewhere to be for 40 minutes. When we docked on the far side, I made my rounds to clear the foot passengers. The man in the coveralls shuffled off, grumbling. The girl with the backpack jogged down the gangway. I went to the rear lounge, empty. I went back out to the gangway and watched the remaining trickle of passengers cross the dock. She wasn't among them. There is nowhere to go on a ferry that a crew member cannot find you. I know every compartment, every utility passage, every locked door on that vessel. I spent 20 minutes searching. I didn't find her. I didn't find evidence she'd ever been there at all. No impression in the seat cushion, no scent of perfume, nothing. I filed it under exhaustion and let it go. She came back 3 weeks later. Same seat, same coat, same folded hands and empty gaze directed at a window that showed nothing but dark water and the lights of the far shore. And when we docked and I went back to clear the lounge, the seat was empty and she was not among the passengers crossing the gangway. I started mentioning it carefully to the longer-serving crew. The deckhands mostly laughed. A woman named Petra, who'd been working Harrow Sound crossings since before I was hired, stopped laughing when I described the coat. Heavy wool, I said. Dark green, old-fashioned cut. Petra set down the rope coil she'd been working on. Which lounge? Rear observation, starboard side. She picked the rope back up and didn't answer for a while. You should talk to Gideon, she finally said. Old deck supervisor, retired about 4 years ago. He used to work this route. I tracked down Gideon through Petra. He lived 20 minutes from the southern terminal and agreed to meet me at a diner near the dock. He listened to everything without interrupting. When I finished, he turned his coffee mug in slow circles on the table. What he told me took a while to piece together. 14 years before I started on the route, there had been an incident during a winter crossing. A mechanical failure in rough weather had caused one of the lower vehicle decks to flood faster than the crew could manage. The evacuation had been mostly successful. Mostly. 4 passengers hadn't made it off the vehicle deck in time. 3 of them were recovered. The 4th, an older woman traveling alone in a green wool coat, was never found. Her name had been Margaret. She'd been 63 years old. She was traveling to the mainland to visit a daughter she hadn't seen in 2 years. Gideon said she wasn't the only one he'd seen over his years on the route. He said he stopped talking about it after the 2nd season because the company had made it quietly clear that such conversations weren't good for ticket sales. I went home and didn't sleep. I told myself the story was folklore. Trauma does things to people who work the water long enough. The mind finds patterns. The mind populates empty spaces with whatever it needs to explain the feeling of being watched. But I kept watching, and what I saw did not stay the same. Margit appeared every 2 or 3 weeks through the winter. Always the rear observation lounge, always the starboard window. Always that same quality of waiting that had no expectation in it. Not patience, exactly, but something that had come out the other side of patience into something quieter and more permanent. Then, in March, a man appeared beside her. He looked younger, 40s maybe. He was dressed like someone who'd been planning to do physical work that day. Canvas trousers, rubber-soled boots, a fleece vest over a thermal shirt. His expression matched hers in a way that I found harder to look at than anything else. It wasn't grief. It was the look of someone who had set something down a long time ago and hadn't decided yet whether to pick it up again. Neither of them acknowledged the other. Neither of them acknowledged me. By summer, I had stopped mentioning it to anyone. There was nothing useful to say. They appeared. They sat. They were gone before docking every time, without exception, without any visible means of departure. Then there were 4, then 9. Then, on a crossing in late September, I walked into the rear lounge and counted 17 passengers, sitting in near-perfect silence. Not one of them was a ticketed traveler. I had checked the manifest at departure. I knew every face that had boarded. None of these were those faces. They ranged in age. A boy who couldn't have been more than 15. A man in a postal service jacket with a name tag I couldn't read from the doorway. An elderly woman with her shoes placed neatly beside her feet on the floor, as if she'd removed them for comfort on a very long journey. All of them wore the same expression. All of them stared at the water. None of them looked at me. I stood in the doorway of that lounge for longer than I can account for. My hand was on the frame. The metal was cold against my palm. The engines vibrated up through the floor into my boots in the way they always did at cruising speed. Everything was completely normal except for the 17 people in that room who had not boarded this vessel. I went back to my rounds. I didn't know what else to do. The night it changed was in October of my 11th year. The anniversary, I realized afterward, almost to the day. Rough weather had come in from the north. Not dangerous, we'd sailed worse, but enough to make the crossing uncomfortable, enough to keep the rear lounge empty of real passengers, enough that the sound looked like hammered black iron under the running lights. I was making my second pass through the passenger decks when I heard something that stopped me in the middle of the corridor. The emergency announcement chime, one clear tone, then another. That chime is hardwired to the bridge. It requires a specific action from a specific panel to activate. It is not something that goes off by itself. I stood in the corridor with my pulse doing things it had no business doing. The chime sounded again. Then a third time. Then it didn't stop. I made myself walk. Toward the rear lounge, my legs felt like they were borrowing the motion from someone else. My mouth tasted like I'd been chewing on old pennies. The corridor lights hummed. Somewhere below me, the engines groaned through a swell. I pushed the lounge door open. Every seat was filled. Every one of them was looking at me. Not at the water, not at each other. At me. I had never been looked at by any of them before. In months of crossings, not once. They had always been facing away. They had always been somewhere else behind their eyes. Not now. 30, maybe more. 30 sets of eyes. And Margit at the starboard window as always, but she had turned her chair, somehow without making a sound. And she was watching me with an expression I can only describe as something that had urgency in it. Something that was trying to cross a distance it didn't have the tools to cross. She raised her hand, slowly, and she pointed, not toward the window, not toward the water, but upward and forward, toward the bridge. I ran. I don't know at what point the decision was made. I was running before I finished making it. Up 2 decks, through the crew passage, through the bridge access door. The officer on watch was Tennant. He was standing at the forward windows when I came through the door, and he turned with an irritated look that died the moment he registered whatever was on my face. "There's something wrong," I said. "Stop the boat." "What are you—" "Stop the boat." He stared at me. I couldn't explain. I had nothing that would fit inside an explanation. I just stood there, breathing hard, and something in how I was standing must have been enough, because Tennant turned back to the console and his hand moved to the throttle. We were running at roughly half speed through the swell when he pulled it back to dead slow. What came through the fog 30 seconds later would have hit us at the waterline. A private vessel, a large one, maybe 18 meters, no running lights, engine at full, crossed our bow at a distance I still don't let myself calculate when I'm trying to sleep. It was there and it was gone in less than 4 seconds. We felt the wake hit us before we'd fully registered what had missed us. Tennant didn't say anything for a long time. Later, the Maritime Authority investigation found that the private vessel's navigation system had failed and the operator had become disoriented in the weather. They had not seen us. They had not known we were there. They said we had been fortunate. I know what fortunate feels like. It doesn't feel like that. Fortunate is luck. What happened that night was something else. I handed in my notice at the end of that season, not because I was frightened. I want to be clear about that. But 11 years is a long time, and I had the feeling that whatever had been happening on those crossings had finished with what it needed to do. I still take the ferry sometimes, as a passenger. Last month, I crossed on a Tuesday evening. Just before docking, I walked back to the rear observation lounge. I don't know what I was looking for. The lounge was empty except for one woman by the starboard window. Heavy green wool coat, silver hair, folded hands. She was looking at the water the way she always had. But when I stopped in the doorway, she turned. She looked at me for a long moment. And then, before I could move or speak or do anything at all, she smiled. The way someone smiles at a person they once did something important with. The way you smile when a debt has been cleared. When the docking announcement came over the intercom and I looked back, the seat was empty. The coat was gone, and the window held nothing but the lights of the harbor coming in from the dock.